Hello, everyone. We'll just give it a moment while folks are, Christy, while folks are getting logged on, and then we'll get started. All right. Fabulous. I think we've got everyone. This is a great turnout. I'm so excited to see so many people joining us tonight. So welcome. So to kick it off, I would love to just welcome everyone. My name is Julie Drzezinski. I am the Director of Employer Engagement in the Center for Career Development. I'm also a Holy Cross alum, class of 99. And I help to coordinate this event along with Meredith Fluke. So Meredith, if you wanted to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Fluke. I'm the director of the Cantor Art Gallery, and welcome.
Perfect. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Rochelle, who's going to kind of moderate tonight, and we'll get started. And before Rochelle does that, I will just mention to all the students, we're definitely going to save some time at the end to ask some questions. But if there's questions that kind of come to you as we're chatting, I will kind of be looking at and moderating the chat. So feel free to pop a question in the chat. And because if in the moment there's something you don't want to forget, please feel free to do that. And I will kind of pipe in if there's questions that come that way. And then we'll also save some time at the end.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Really excited to do this. We did this last year and it was really successful. So we wanted to have another event like this and just continue it on Zoom, because why not? You know, I guess we're all missing this Zoom space now that we're back. But so I actually graduated class of 2004. So Christy thought it might be nice for me to chime in because I actually know a few of the other folks on the panel as well. And we're going to start off just by having everyone introduce themselves and really describe their class year and their kind of trajectory since graduating from Holy Cross, kind of what they're up to now. So we'll go around and we can start with Rich.
All right, thanks, Rochelle. Thanks, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces out there. So I'm Rich Thorne, class of 03. I was a visual arts and economics double major. So I had like both sides of the brain going back in college. And I feel like I'm using both of them now. I'm creative director at a marketing agency called Mind Plus Matter. It's headquartered in Boston, but has offices around the world. And so I lead a team of designers and writers to create marketing pieces, both branding, promotional, all that type of stuff for health and biotech companies. So I've actually been with this company and its previous iterations my entire career, starting as an intern in college. So I've had the unique opportunity to see the company grow and change over the years. And it's been a great ride. So excited to chat with you all.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Schuler, a Holy Cross class of 02. Since I was a classics major at Holy Cross, so I guess more on the liberal arts side, but did a lot of art history, especially classical art history, and that led me to an interest in architecture. And from Holy Cross, I did a master's of architecture at the Boston Architectural College, and then practiced architecture both in Boston at a firm that did a lot of large-scale buildings for science and healthcare, large-scale institutional buildings, which was really fun. And then moved to Colorado in late 09, and continued practicing architecture in both commercial and institutional. And recently, in the past year and a half, I ended up taking a position with the city and county of Denver as the senior architect. And that was a bit of a career change in that now I'm working on the client side, making larger scale decisions and doing strategic planning for the city of Denver, which is a really exciting change. And it's been really interesting, especially during the pandemic, during all the different changes that we're seeing in how we interact with spaces in general. So that's sort of the long and short, and I can go into more if anyone has questions too.
Thanks so much. We have some architectural studies students and maybe students interested in urban studies, which is a minor that we're sort of launching. So hopefully they can connect with you or ask questions in the chat or at the end. Lorena.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and kind of be connecting with some old friends in this group and meeting you all too. So I graduated class of 2015. I was a visual arts studio and Italian double major in the honors program, and also kind of dabbled in the pre-business program too. I did study abroad in Italy, and once I graduated, I started working in New York City at Sotheby's Auction House. And then I sort of was there for 2 years, pivoted to going back to school for my MFA at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philly. And then since moved back to Connecticut, where I currently live, out of Norwalk, about an hour from the city. And I work as the education manager for the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum. And I'm also a resident artist at the local Norwalk Art Space. So basically, I do all of the public programming, school programming for the museum. And the museum is focused on basically showing underrepresented or early career artists. So it's kind of an exciting, fast-paced sort of job. And then I also have my own art practice to view. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. So interesting already to hear all of those different trajectories that you've been on. And Lauren, what about you?
Yes, hello. Sorry, I just have a little background noise that's going away now. Anyway, hey, my name's Lauren. I graduated in 2014. I was also a double major. I did studio art. But first I did an English major so that my parents would be happy with me. And then I followed my true passion, which was art. After school, I was interested in architecture. So I went to the Harvard's Graduate School of Design summer program. I had a blast. I thought that's what I wanted to do. So then I got my first job in an architecture firm in DC, and then hopped over to get a different experience at a different firm in Baltimore. The first one was a little more interior design. The second one was renovating a lot of school libraries in Baltimore. I didn't love it. So then I pivoted again. I kind of was looking around Baltimore trying to figure out what my next move was. And I found this atelier program in Baltimore. My school was called the Schuler School of Fine Arts. So I stayed there for 4 years. I sort of leveraged the work I was doing in the architecture firm, which was a little bit of like marketing and advertising, like management. And I actually helped the school just build their social media accounts and do a little more like outreach. I did a lot of like events for the school, sort of fundraising, loved it. Thought I was going to go to grad school after that. But then I ended up getting this job with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. And I also have been told that I have to say that everything I say today does not represent the government. It's just me and my thoughts and feelings. Yeah, so now I've been there for about 1.5 years at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and I'm a banknote apprentice. So I'm studying to do the portraits on the banknotes. So like Benjamin Franklin, that's what I do all day. So yeah, and it also, in addition to
that as a job, I mean, it's just, it's just so amazing, right? It's like the most amazing thing.
Yeah, that they just forgot that office exists, and it's it's an anomaly in the government. I'm just kidding. It's super important for like counterfeit, protecting counterfeit stuff. Government, I mean, in the, our currency. Yeah, I wanted to add too that I also have like a pretty strong home painting practice that I've kept up with while I do this full-time engraving gig. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I'm sure we'll come back to different parts of each of your trajectories in some of the questions later too. With our students now working in the studio or doing liberal arts kind of general studies, perhaps some of them who are not majors, I'm thinking about like, if you could reflect back, what are 1 or 2 skills that you developed that you use in your work today? I think sometimes it's hard to see the skills as we're using them or hard to name them. So if a couple people want to jump in with like some of these skills that you think you developed in art or through art that are still really important in your work now.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, thanks.
I think so. It's both a skill and sort of a practice too. Is just the sketchbook. And I can remember in my first drawing class freshman year, I had to copy a well-known piece of art in my sketchbook every single day for the entire semester. And while I'm not necessarily copying things now, I'm working out problems. I'm bringing my sketchbook to meetings. I'm on calls with it. And I'm constantly either taking notes, mostly taking notes, sometimes sketching out ideas. It might be a logo. It might be an image or a composition of an advertisement that I think needs to work. And it's just a really quick way for me to get something down, especially since we're all like virtually computer-based. It just takes longer to work stuff out on the computer. And sometimes paper and pen is just the easiest thing to solve a problem in the moment.
Thanks.
I agree with the sketchbook. I'm never more than 2 feet away from my sketchbook. And I wasn't even a studio art major, but I did keep a sketchbook even at Holy Cross, and it's critical. But, you know, aside from that, clear communication and the communication skills and writing skills that you learn at Holy Cross are so critical, and they really stand out. I feel like, you know, in general, that's a weak point for a lot of, you know, my peers. And it has been through, you know, throughout my working career, that the clear communication skills and that actually is a standout, I think. And I would say, you know, in every email that you ever write, those things are very important, as well as communicating with your team and with the public, and in general. But, you know, synthesizing, you know, these sort of more broad scale ideas that you learn at Holy Cross and in some of our liberal arts courses, or all of our liberal arts courses, you know, is something that will play out on a daily basis. For me, it's the most important thing, the liberal arts way of thinking, that it's, you know, understanding a bigger picture and how that impacts what you're doing on a daily basis, either on the large scale or the small scale. So that's where I carry it through.
Thanks. Lorena, do you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off of that. I think communication skills are key in any workplace. And I remember at Holy Cross in particular, there was a sort of professionalism sometimes in the way the groups were run, or even in the crits. And really translating that to anything else after school is so valuable. And I was kind of surprised by, I think, Gabrielle, we're on the same page here. A lot of other colleagues kind of struggle with that if it's not something that they've developed previously in their education. So I would not undervalue what you are doing now. And also just the kind of passion among all of the Holy Cross students. I think that was something that really defined my experience. And if you have that internal drive, that's going to propel you to your next step, and kind of looking inward and looking towards your mentors, which I'm sure is something we'll talk about later on.
Just to follow up, maybe Lorena or Lauren, if you want to jump in, like thinking about those skills, is there a way that you felt you particularly developed them at Holy Cross that the students could focus on? Or you said crits was a way to develop the communication skills. Anything else that you might add to that?
Well, yeah, I would say all of the papers we had to write. I do remember the long nights in Diamond. I was more of a last minute type, I will say. And so pushing those out at the end, I mean, there's always room for improvement with time management. But also, in addition to written skills, oral skills when you're presenting in class, that's so critical, just to be able to have that opportunity. And all of those jitters and everything that you might feel kind of maybe reserved with, if you want to share your work or anything like that with your professors, I would take advantage of those opportunities, because that's always going to be with you in any capacity for a job moving forward.
Thanks. Yeah, Laura, do you want to, I can see you going towards the phone. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you want us all to jump in on each question, but I feel like we all probably have.
Yeah, go ahead. Especially this, I think this is a really important question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is, I think with the path I've chosen, I feel like every stage in my career has forced me to work slower and slower and slower. But that journey began in class. I remember Christy Ringland like telling me to like just like slow down, like finish these pieces. Like I kind of that's echoed through everything I do. Now I'm working on pieces that take 6 months for one little thing. But I think it's definitely something I would say is like, don't get too caught up sometimes in quantity or trying to like just worry about quality, because you know it really does matter, and you'll be able to really work on a nice portfolio, or wherever you're going to go with your next step. You'll have work that you're really proud of, and just like slowing down sometimes and just like giving something you're working on like your full attention and trying to, you know, and it's again, it goes with time management, like Lorena was saying, like just give yourself enough time to really work on projects and like take them to completion. And it's a skill that I'm still working on, and it takes years and years to really like get to that point. But that's my takeaway. I wish I could tell my younger self, like, just slow down, finish that painting. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. So this is, I think, somewhat related, you know, thinking about those skills that we've developed. Maybe sometimes we don't realize we're developing them as it's happening, but are there ways, how did you package yourself then as a student from a liberal arts college for interviews or for your first jobs after Holy Cross? Like, how did you present yourself so that those skills showed through, or is there a way that you think you would advise students to do that?
I could probably jump in because I think it was a hard leap, hard and not, you know, so I also went to the Harvard GSD program over the summer after my senior year. And I was encouraged to do that. I was really, I was uncertain what I wanted to do after leaving Holy Cross. I kind of knew that I wanted to go to graduate school in something, that my academic career wasn't over, but wasn't sure what that was going to be. And architecture had always been something that had been an idea. I didn't have a mentor, and I didn't really know any like living, breathing architects that I could ask, what is your life like? How did you get there? You know, what is that about? You know, but I loved design, and I loved drawing, and I loved the art history and the architectural history. And my senior year, first semester senior year, which was a very tumultuous year. So, you know, I graduated in 2002, you know, which landed 9/11 the September of my senior year. So, you know, that was, it was a really tough time. You know, I think a lot of people like now are doing a lot of, you know, personal reflection. You know, it's a time of, you know, of great upheaval in the was a time of great upheaval in the country, but also, you know, the economy just bottomed out like immediately. And, you know, people in, you know, a couple years before, you know, the 2000, you know, early 2000s before 2002, you know, were graduating from Holy Cross and getting jobs anywhere. Like they could just, you know, get a job in tech. You know, the tech bubble with, you know, the .coms were still really a big thing then. And so it was really easy to get work. You know, after 9/11, it was not. It was definitively very difficult. And so, you know, I was looking at graduate school as a very serious option, you know, early on because I love school, but also because of that. And so my first semester senior year, I was taking architectural history with Jody Ziegler, Professor Ziegler, who was a personal mentor and an incredible human. And she noted immediately during that class, we were keeping a sketchbook, and we were, you know, studying architectural history, and that she noticed that I was particularly passionate about all of this, and she recommended that I go to the GSD the Harvard GSD program for architecture over that summer, and she, you know, helped guide me into that. But shortly, so after that, that's a summer program. You know, I emerged from that program after the summer, you know, so graduated, went to that program directly after graduation. And then, you know, that September started applying to graduate schools, but also wanted to work in architecture. And, to see if I liked it, like what Lauren was saying, like working in a firm is different than thinking about working in a firm. And it's a tough situation. So what I did is, I packaged my portfolio that I could, hack together from the work that some of the work that I had done, previously, some of which at Holy Cross. I took some studio courses, including photography, some of my own personal practice, the work that I did in the studios at Harvard, put together a portfolio and use that, and I've had architectural professors also tell me this is the horse that you ride. Your portfolio is so important. It will follow you your entire career. It's like I still keep a portfolio current. This is just part and parcel with, practice. So my portfolio that I had, and plus like a really great story about what Holy Cross could lend to skill set that I could bring to an employer, which is dubious. But at the time I was like, okay, here's my portfolio. Here's what I can do. Please hire me. I will work for almost free. Anywhere that was within driving distance of my parents' home in Southern New Hampshire, I applied to every architecture firm that I could find in the phone book, and which was still a phone book. And then I just basically begged them for work. Like I really, it's like I'm here to work, and I'm, I really wanted to do this. And finally, someone gave me a job, and that was it was really about grit. And honestly, like I could say that over and over again. It's really about
it's so interesting. Some of my seniors are here, but we just did a reading from a book called The Rise, and it's called the reading is called The Grit of the Arts. So I think that's a really great point that you bring up. This idea of the things that you build through criticism, through writing, through talking about your work, and that process of the kind of grittiness that someone develops. So I was going to just throw that question to Rich, because you're sort of, I think now, right, in marketing, and maybe a lot of students want to get into marketing, but they don't have a marketing degree, right? So is there a way that you kind of packaged your skills so that you could put that on your resume, or how did you sort of use this?
Yeah. So I didn't do a ton of, I'll be honest, I didn't do a ton of packaging of myself when I was in school. I just kind of lucked into like an interview, and then it kind of led to an internship, and then I made, impressed some people, I guess, in the internship, and they gave me a job right after school. So that part was, you could call it easy. But I will say I've been doing a lot of hiring over the years and reviewing people who are coming in. And what I would say is, especially, in a marketing world where I am, where it's all very health-based and pharmaceuticals and biotech and science, like you don't get that experience anywhere else unless you're in the role, in the job. So what I look for in creatives, whether they're writers, whether they're designers, whether they're, UX, web focused folks, is passion and curiosity, and to be able to, talk about their work and what drives them in a way that makes me want to learn more and gets me excited, because, I'm looking for people to bring new, fresh ideas in, so they don't, you don't have to, if you want to join an ad agency, you don't have to have the work that exactly is what they do. But if you can package your own, what you've done over your college career, whether it's side projects or actual schoolwork, and have a cohesive story behind it, have a like a focused vision, that to me tells me that, you can have an idea and follow it through and follow the process. To me, it's less about the finished product and more about how you got there. That's really important.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good perspective too, thank you for offering that from the other side as someone who's hiring. So I think kind of along that, I think we've sort of heard a little bit like Rich, sort of something happened and then another thing happened and then he landed at this job, right? And I was wondering for Lauren, maybe starting with Lorena and Lauren, thinking about these kind of planned and unplanned events that sort of got you to where you are. So sometimes we always think like there's a straight path and that's your job and your career, but I mean, it sounds like each of you already, and you're the younger ones in this panel here, have already had a couple of different little things that happen along the way that maybe weren't planned. So I don't know if either one of you wants to speak to that.
Yeah, Lorena, do you want to? I mean, I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, if you want to go first, sure.
It's funny seeing Lorena because we like keep colliding in like a really funny way where anyway, it's great. But the first time we met was actually like, this is the takeaway I would say for everybody is, I feel like every time I've made like a pivot it's been not so much because I've like been like, now I need to go to my atelier. It's kind of just been, being open to what happens in life and being like friendly and honestly like being nice to people. Like we met on the trip to Germany, which was with the art history department, and it was in Cologne, and they were doing like stained glass with anyway. And the reason I even got on the trip was because I was on an art trip to New York and I was taking photos, and like a strange man came up to me and was like, "Hey, are you taking photos?" And I was like, I could have been like, "Get away," but instead I was like, "Yeah, like, you know, I'm just getting into photography." And he ended up being Virginia how do you say your last name? Regan. I didn't. She was never Regan's husband. He was like, "Hey, you should come on this cool trip to Germany and like let's do photography together." And Lorena and I were in the same room. And then anyway, that's kind of been like every time I've gotten an interesting job or done something cool, it's just been being open and like alert and like following up, introducing yourself. Like my first job was a friend of my mom's, and she was like, "You know, maybe we'll have space at the firm. Like we don't right now, but like contact me." And I was like, contacted her exactly when she told me to, and was like, "Hey, it's me again. Like, just so you know, I'm really interested in working for you." Like, da-da-da-da-da. And then it just like went from there. And then for the job I have right now, the way I even heard about it, because the BEP it's kind of like an elusive, they don't really have openings very often. I was at a charcoal drawing, portrait drawing class, and I befriended the model. We got coffee, and I was like, she followed up with me weeks later and was like, "Hey, another person I model for has an opening at their job, you know, like I just thought you might be interested. I'll just send it your way." And so that's like, I guess what I would say is, yeah, I've had a lot of changes, but I think it's just, it will serve you well in life to just be like open and friendly and say hello to people and introduce yourself and ask them what they do. And you never know, they might send you a job opening in 2 weeks. Yeah.
We don't really want the students to talk to the models right now, or like, you know, in this, but you know, sure.
Sorry.
No, it worked for you.
Extrovert.
But it's different maybe outside of school. No, that's, yeah. I think that's a really interesting point, right? This idea of being open to things that are happening and not maybe being so focused always on this end goal, but like being, you know, welcoming the pivots that might happen. Lorena, anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I love this kind of conversation about networking, but in a friendly, casual way, because at the end of the day, we're all people, and you know, just want to make those connections and grow. So for my journey, I would say from Holy Cross, I really tried to take advantage of the resources in the Center for Career Development, which is how I met Julie. And I started kind of early after my freshman year with the with kind of the COE's summer business program, but the way that it sort of translated back to my arts practice and then my career was I had an internship when I studied abroad. So I did a year in Florence and I interned at an auction house there. And I had some internship experience with a gallery back in New York City through the Center of Career Development, kind of when I returned. But I was in there trying to look at my resume, asking for advice. I tapped into the alumni network that you can, just like all of us, kind of reach out to the career office and they can connect you with people in fields you're interested in. So I did that, and I connected with someone who was in auction in New York at Sotheby's, which didn't land me the job, but had the kind of exposure that I knew, oh, this maybe could be a next step. And so as I was looking for opportunities when I graduated, that's kind of how I try to get my foot in the door. And then a series of interviews later, I started there. And then one thing, kind of going back to the question about skills at Holy Cross, I think the education there really instilled in us a sense of self-reflection, and then knowing really what's right for you, because no path in the arts is linear. The grit, I love that grit chapter and article in that reading, because it's so true. What's going to propel you forward is your drive, and no one's going to kind of tell you otherwise. People will support you along the way, but you have to have that confidence in yourself. So for me, there was just a point where I just felt like working in an auction industry was not the right fit. It was more sales focused. It was really missing the sort of teaching component, the community around the art conversations that I enjoyed. And I remember just cramming to spend the week in between Christmas Day and New Year's to develop some sort of a portfolio. So Gabrielle, when you were mentioning continuing your portfolio, keeping it fresh, I struggled when I was commuting into the city during that time for that. So that's how I kind of put my feelers out there for MFA programs. And I also want to mention my mentor at Holy Cross was Christy Rinklin, who was both my academic mentor, but also my painting professor. And she has helped me even since graduating in years past. So it's just kind of tuning into your network, kind of realizing, where your heart is and where the opportunities are, and following that. And I'm so happy with where I landed in museum education, which is a good fit for me. So
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that might just lend us to kind of lead to the next thought about this idea of like networks. And I think people were alluding to this, but if there's anything more you want to add about, how do you build that? How do you maintain that? I think we've heard from Lauren just being friendly and welcome, and Lorena sort of also talking about that support, but maybe if anyone else has anything to add about building or maintaining a network outside of Holy Cross, reaching out, using career services, anything else to add?
It's critical. I mean, it's number one. The network, I think that has been really important to me is Women in Design, which is for all of those architecturally focused folks out there. There's typically a chapter that's involved with every AIA branch in the country. I was chair of the one for the Boston Society of Architects when I was in Boston and practicing there. And when we moved to Colorado, that was the first thing I did. I joined Women in Design Denver, which got me my first job in Denver during the Great Recession. There were no jobs also to be had. And it was like that critical moment of like actually just building a network. Like I didn't go out really pounding the pavement. I went out building a network. And that got me a job in 2010. In a really bad economy. But yeah, so Women in Design, I think, is a really great thing. But also just, finding those connections wherever you go. And I agree. It's like, they're not just in one location. It's everywhere you go and everything you do. I've been really focused in the arts as well, mostly in contemporary art, and been really involved with our local museums, all of our local museums, including the Denver Art Museum. And those networks actually have, gotten me tips on different avenues of, both professionally and extracurricularly. But, my most recent job, was sort of another example of grit, is that, through my network, I heard that there was going to be some movement, that the senior architect in Denver was leaving their job, and that was planned. And I started networking into that, and it took 9 months, 9 months from when I heard to when I actually was hired. But it was a big gig to land, and it was 3 levels of major interviews, but it was really networking. It wasn't anything other than that.
Right. Thanks. So I think this idea of the professional organizations too is a nice, great thing to mention and remind people of. And I would say, thinking from a studio perspective, sometimes I might not always call it networking, but just call it community. Thinking about like who in my community is also making art. So maybe Lauren and Lorena, in your own personal practices, have you found community? Is that something that you're thinking about as you maintain your painting and your studio practice? Lauren?
That's actually, I like almost unmuted for a second ago. That I was going to add that too, that it's so important for your personal practice. And for me, my personal practice led me to my like career job. So, you know what I mean? I depend on my friends so much. I'm such an extrovert. Like I get so much more done when I meet up with friends and I'm like, hey, I'm going to get a model tonight. Do you guys want to come over and like, we'll all paint together and hang out? Like my community, like keeps me going and keeps me extremely productive. So it's very, very important for me. And it's definitely helped my career. Yeah. But I met them all at Schuler. I met them all at the atelier I went to, mostly people who are like-minded, kind of the stuff I was doing there was very realism based, like skill based. So we kind of all had like a similar mission. So I'll say that that's the community I kind of stuck to.
Thanks. Yeah, Lorena?
Yeah, and I mean, community is something that always changes too, depending on where you are and what you create. It's not just who's around you, but as we've learned through this year, you know, what kind of relationships can you build to kind of support you? And community was something I was really missing in my first job out of school. And even when I moved to Philly, for anybody kind of interested in going to art school for graduate school afterwards, it's a very different environment. I will say there's quite a transition for what you're exposed to, and also depending on where you're located, kind of size and what your practice can develop into. Community also, as it relates to sharing your work, if you want to try to get into exhibitions and galleries. During that time, I was showing in Philly and also in Chelsea in New York City at Anna's Arena. And let me tell you, it was all through who kind of I knew and what kind of studio visits you would get. But honestly, the best community is not that of competition. It's really, you know, how you can grow together. So what I've found is just, you know, what sustains me is reaching out to people and seeing how can I help? How can we connect? How can we kind of move through this time together? And also my current job is all about community. Every time we have a school or a community group coming to the museum, it's about kind of cultivating that relationship and having it focus on the conversations around the art.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think one other thing that a few people touched on, the little shout out to Professor Rinklin and Professor Ziegler, who was a great human. I think he said that so well, just a wonderful human. Any thoughts or things that you want to share with students about mentors or finding a mentor? Like, how do you do it? Do they pick you? Do you pick them? What was your experience like with a mentor, if you had one or you feel you had one? And anyone can jump in.
I think it's been really hard. I'm not going to lie. I think finding a mentor is very difficult. Finding a mentor in a professional setting is, I think, even harder. You know, Professor Ziegler was incredible because she, I think, sought out people who she saw something in. You know, there was sort of and for those of you who don't know her, she was in art history. She's art history professor who specialized in architectural history. And she very tragically passed in 2010, I believe, or 2011, of pancreatic cancer, well before her time. And she found, you know, I didn't seek her, but again, I was open. Since then, I've had mentors who have sort of come and gone through my life. You know, some of the best mentors are just friends who, you know, I find are like-minded, and, you know, and again, like what, you know, Lauren and Lorena were saying, you sort of row together, you know, in the same direction. But I think that, you know, today's work environment, you know, today's work environment is very difficult in that way, because I think that a lot of the people who are, you know, just a few steps ahead of you feel like they really are trying to stay afloat too. And it's really, frankly, difficult for them to want to pull you up because there's some level of competition. And I really wasn't anticipating that going into the workforce, because like, it just didn't, that's not how I thought things went, that there were people who were, senior to you, and they, you're subordinate to them in some way, and you're working hard, and, they feel secure, but they don't, like that's not how today's workforce is, unfortunately, in most of, at least in the private sector. In the public sector, I think it's different. But there's a level, no. I think the city of Denver, we're municipal, we're not federal. But I still think that, there's a little bit more security, on a daily basis. You're not holding onto your chair during the recession quite as much. But, you know what I mean? So I think it's slightly different, but I still think finding mentors in a professional setting is really difficult.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's good. I think that's important to point out too, right? That it's like everyone, especially right now, it's a very difficult situation. And it's like, if you are just hanging on, people might not have that time to connect with you, or they might be really just, like you said, trying to stay afloat. So that I think that's also, maybe for students not to take it so personally, if maybe they're approaching someone and it's not working out, or they're thinking they're going to have a relationship and it's not, I think that might be also important to remember. And Rich, I wonder about you and your industry and your field.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm thinking back to my early days. I don't think I was actively looking for a mentor, but I kind of stumbled into one. And from my experience, just kind of observing both my own experiences and folks that I've been working with, it can be a bit of an organic experience, like kind of like any relationship, both sides kind of have to like really want it. And so, if you're looking for that type of mentor relationship, I think it's a matter of kind of like seeking out people who are doing things that interest you or feel compelling, and just asking them questions. Like I think, especially in a creative field, I'm always asking for feedback from other folks, because that's the only way the work gets better. If you're all in it yourself and working in a silo, it's just going to be fine for you, but maybe not anyone else. So I think being open to feedback, asking for it, and listening to it. Don't have to always take it, but just like understand perspectives from different people. It can be really valuable. And maybe one of them becomes like a person that you rely on long-term. I've got one, strong one that's been kind of like a sounding board for me throughout my career. And he's been always has a good perspective on things. So it's not something you can really force, but as long as you're open to it and searching out people that have experiences and styles that work with you, then eventually you'll find one.
Thanks. So I have a couple of parting questions, then I just want to make sure I leave time for the student questions. The chat has been very quiet, but feel free to raise your hand and just speak out when you have questions in a moment here. But so this is like a classic, great question. What do you wish you had known when you were a student on campus? So looking back at your younger self, Lauren, I think you had said that, or like tell yourself to slow down. So we have that advice to younger Lauren. Any other things you wish you had known when you were a student?
Yeah, actually, one big one that I like really regret from undergrad is I really wish I had been less worried about my work. Well, you got to worry about your work, but I wish I had asked my professors more about what they do. Especially, I obviously worked a lot with Christy Rinklin in painting, and I really regret not saying hey, how do you do that? How are you getting that quality of this? And just really getting to know, they're your professors for a reason. They're very good at everything they do. I wish I had dug into that more and learned more while I was there, because they're such an amazing resource. Aside from giving you advice and helping you with your work, they're amazing artists too. That's definitely how I approach things now. With my work, I'll go take a workshop with an artist, and I'm just all about what they're into and trying to learn from the way they're making art and their style. And I just didn't do that back then, and I really regret it, because I feel like would have gotten a lot more out of some of those classes. I'd recommend that, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about something you maybe wish you had known? Maybe not wish that you did, but wish you knew about? I wish I knew women's and gender studies was a thing. I didn't take any classes in that. I wish I did.
I'll add another thing. I feel like, I mean, I'm sure these young kids all know this, but I wish I had known just how important digital skills would be for any job after college. Like I'm a traditional artist. I literally have a job working with my hands, but it's going to turn into digital quickly. But literally everything else I do, at all the marketing at the architecture firm, working with RFPs, all that kind of stuff, it was all graphic design stuff. So even though something might be your passion, those digital skills are really going to come in handy. So anyway,
just come to my office hours and I'll explain resolution again, and then I'll like explain it a different way, and then we'll look at some examples, and then I'll explain it again because I think it's hard to understand sometimes. Yeah, Rich?
Yeah, I think one thing I wish I had known or was more aware of was like, you don't have to have it all figured out. It's okay to change. It's okay to pivot. I think we've heard some really interesting stories about career pivots on this panel. And I think, you know, especially I'm thinking back, like I had a roommate that was pre-med and he had his whole career figured out. And I was like, oh man, I gotta know what I'm doing tomorrow. And you don't have to. You can start one path and be exposed to something you never heard of before, and then take a left turn, and people will support you along the way. So that's
Thanks.
it.
And then any other parting advice? So maybe not necessarily what you wish you had known, but anything that you think maybe particularly related to your own field that would be sage advice, anything that you could pass on?
Well, I think in general, especially coming out of this year, mental health is so key to talk about and prioritize as you're going through all of this class training and, you know, prepping for the future. Everything can feel like it's swirling at 1,000,000 miles per hour and only picks up after you graduate. So I would really take advantage of just a counseling center, and also, you know, your professors as resources if you need support, because that was really key for me, and something that I try to keep working on for myself is stress management. And then just as we were talking about community, knowing kind of who you can reach out to when. I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, it's not critical to have one person who can help you with all the things, but you'll kind of know as you navigate through, you know, who you can lean on and go with your gut. And also just to, as Lauren said before, kind of slowing down. I was very hyper-focused on all of my projects and trying to make everything so perfect, and nothing ever really can be that way. So really just giving yourself some grace as you're moving through, because you're in an amazing program. And I'm sure you all have so many talents to share. So being proud of that.
That was really sage advice, Lorena. Thank you. That was so great to remember. And I've been starting to try to ask the students too, like when you're working on this project or during the semester, how are you taking time to dream or rest, or, you know, just including that in some of our project reflections. I think it is important. So thank you for bringing that up. Any questions from students? You can just unmute, or you could type them. Michael's come in to view Professor Beatty here and maybe wants to say hi. Anyone else from the rest of the students who just wants to chime in? I think there are probably some really interesting things the group can share. I'm scrolling to see who's here that I might be able to call on.
I'm kind of curious to know what fields people are interested in the group. And I know it takes a bit of courage to kind of share, but whether it's in the chat or unmuting yourself, you know, we're all ears.
Well, and I know a few, Rachel mentioned that a few of you are interested in architecture. Anybody want to ask any questions? Because I had no one to ask anything of when I was at Holy Cross, zero. So feel free, anyone.
And I also see Madison asked a question in the chat too.
Oh, thank you. So, I'll just read it aloud just so we can all hear it. So Madison asked, have any of you created your own companies? And if so, how did you tackle that?
I mean, I could chime in just because entrepreneurship is something that I sort of explored the idea of at Holy Cross and I'm still kind of grappling with, but I think as an artist, you're automatically a business person too, whether you like it or not, because you are your own advocate. If people are interested in buying your work, you need to have kind of skills built on how to navigate those conversations, draft an invoice, share that out. Legally, you'd have to create your own kind of business entity, and there's different ways to do that. And also just the digital side of, sharing your practice out. Almost everything I do is collaborative. So while I don't have my own business entity right now, I do work under those kinds of regulations and do work with like W-9s and payouts and that sort of thing. So I think that's a learned skill over time. And I wish that I had a little bit more of that support or knew of resources for that support at Holy Cross, which I'm sure Julia can take care of for you.
Thanks. Yeah, an art business. I don't know if Lauren was going to chime in with something.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna sort of say something similar, like collaborating. So nobody has all the skills you need for everything. So I usually, rely on like friends of mine who are like business, they study business maybe at a different college. I'll just call them up and be like, hey, I've got this cool idea, like poke holes in it. Like tell me what you would do better, or like, where do you see any problems? And then we just chalk it out and it just kind of helps me formulate an idea. But yeah, use all the resources you've got. Like, don't be afraid to call people. That's probably the biggest thing I would say in every aspect. Don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help or ask about them, and connect with people because they can definitely help you.
Yeah, especially with a website too. We use social media so often these days. And I will say even in the museum sphere, curators use it to find new artists to work with, just to network. But I remember senior year creating our first portfolio-based websites, and that was critical for me at least. So there are many free platforms to do that. And that's something that if you want to keep going with your studio practice would be just great to keep trying out and getting feedback.
Thanks. Maybe like one last question from a student. Shay, I was going to call on you just because I thought Shay's got something to say. Yes.
I was going to ask you about I know that's sometimes with jobs, there's a better or I feel like with a lot of financy jobs, a lot of the job opportunities are coming in the fall. Would you say in kind of the more artistically focused jobs, or should I be really focusing on it now? Or do you suggest kind of spending or dedicating a lot of time in the spring? Or what was your experience like? Or even after graduation, where is kind of the best timing of it?
As early as you can start, that's feasible for you because the early bird really does get the worm. There have been missed opportunities for me where I'm happy where I ended up, but definitely if I could have started sooner, I think would have given me more options. So if you have, let's say, opportunities that you see start in the fall, send an email, just say you're interested, even if the application process hasn't opened yet. That way you let them know that you're in the running. And if you need to find a sort of part-time job in the summer, which is something that I did, after school, that can kind of fill your time and keep you with a sort of income as you're still looking.
I'm going to jump in as well because I'm just going to just say one thing about that, because Gabrielle made a really good point, which is sometimes these job processes don't follow the same timelines that some business jobs work with, and that 9-month I mean, even though that was sort of, because of the number of interviews, but sometimes the job processes and applications and interviews can take a really long time in the non-for-profit world. And they'll just like drop that search for 6 months and come back to it. So it is important to really sort of apply when things are coming up as much as you can.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great thing, Shay. And a really good question, Shay, like that some jobs have these very particular timelines and things. And so it's really so different from different industry to industry. So,
I was just going to add one more thing, which is just my experience that keep your LinkedIn profile update. I mean, it's funny that I'm saying this because mine is so not updated right now, but back when I was hustling just out of college and I got the job with the architecture firm where I was doing sort of the marketing and office management, I had that uploaded in my LinkedIn. I still get people requesting, like asking if I want to apply for new positions. That's really helpful. So, if you don't see something you like right away, or if you get your first job, like just keep that updated because you'll get a lot of opportunities just from showing what you have experience with and what you're interested in and all the other fancy gadgets on LinkedIn.
Well, and also if you're interested in a particular firm or a particular, company, I've had luck actually going to LinkedIn, researching who works there, introducing yourself through LinkedIn, asking for coffee. Can I buy you a coffee and pick your brain? And then they know who you are. There might be no job posted or available at that time, but there might be one in 5 months or 3 months or 3 weeks. It's the networking in, but like it's sort of expanding your profile. Who knows you, who has had a good experience, meeting you, and then when something comes up that is a fit, then they'll call you, or when you see that job posted, then you can say, then you apply for it, and then also ping that person saying, I just applied to your firm. Remember we met for coffee 2 months ago? I was really impressed with, what you said about your firm, and now I'm applying to it, and honestly, like places that I've worked and, like Rich, I've been in the position to hire as well. If another employee gives HR the resume or says, this person, I know this person, you'll be almost guaranteed an interview. Because it's almost insulting if they don't interview the person that a current employee has said, this person should be interviewed. So I think it's an important thing to sort of like doing that kind of information gathering ahead. And actually, I've also done work with firms trying to actually win projects, on the business development side. It's the same premise, finding work for yourself and finding work for your firm.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm gonna just start to wrap it up here in the interest of time, but there seems to be a core group of students who are still interested in things. So what we might do is just, if students want to.
Dora had a question too.
Yeah, I think that Dora has a question.
In the chat, yeah.
And I would say for the panelists, if students had questions after, is it okay if they contact you and reach out to you? I just wanted to put that in as we're starting to wrap up. Yeah, okay, great. So just know, I think you could follow up with people individually afterwards if someone is interested in marketing, for example, or if people have different questions. So Dora had asked a question in the chat. She is one of our architectural studies students, and she was asking about how do you suggest starting to study for the NCARB, which I think is the licensing procedure. And how did you study for that if you didn't have a mentor?
No mentor needed. Zero mentor needed for that. It's, so you need experience for sure. And it used to be that all states required that you complete all of your internship, which is approximately 3 years, under a licensed architect before you could sit for your exams. Those licensing requirements have changed over the years so that you can do that in some states concurrently. So you could potentially get your internship hours at the same time as you're studying and taking your exams. And that's state by state too, so that's not universal. But so studying for the exams, it helps having some experience, but it's not required necessarily. I think your life will be made easier having some experience under your belt before you start studying for the exams, because it's more practical than it is academic in nature, the exams. But I would say start taking, so my general advice is to take your exams as soon as you possibly can. Get your license as soon as you possibly can. Do not delay. And as you probably, as you will understand once you hit the job, the actual job field, once you're practicing architecture, you will have a lot of peers who put that off and go on practicing architecture without a license because they don't necessarily require that. Not everyone is going to have, so not everyone's going to have to stamp drawings. I've only used my stamp a handful of times, frankly, and I've been a practicing architect for 17 years. And so, but I've had my license for a long time at this point. But what that gives you is a certain amount of clout and marketability that your peers will never have. And especially, in my opinion, if you're a female in the field, because we're still a vast minority, a vast minority in architecture. If you're licensed, you'll be head and shoulders above your peers, and you'll be more marketable. So I made that a priority to take my exams and get licensed and go through the NCARB process. But you do not need a mentor. You need somebody to sign off on your internship hours, but that's not a mentor. Frankly, that's somebody who's overseeing your work. But you don't need personal advice. You need, it's honestly grit. It's another one of these things like sit down with the books and study. And everybody at Holy Cross can do this. This is something that you have learned to do.
Great. Thank you so much. And Dora, I think you could follow up, and you had also reached, I think the other woman had a similar licensure process or something. I don't know. I can't recall. There was a mentor. So I've set up some of the seniors with other mentors, and I think they had maybe some similar thoughts about that. And thanks to Lorena actually for being a mentor to one of the seniors this year as well. So Lori was the other architect who's I think 2008 she graduated. So we're kind of winding down here. And again, as I said, there was a few interested people and they could certainly follow up with other questions, but thank you so much to our panel who have given their time and had such valuable advice and such a nice range of experiences and things that you have shared. I think will be so helpful for the students moving forward. Naming those skills, being open to things, I thought was so lovely. So some of the things you said, it's so nice to hear them, because maybe we do them, but we don't think about it. So that reflective kind of practice too, that Lorena talked about was so great to hear. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming out, and have a good one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. This is great.